Everybody, so I'm going to go ahead and look at Jupiter Ed with you so you can understand what's going to happen in the future. This past semester I've used 3 different report cards because I'm trying to get a standards-based gradebook that works. However, this just doesn't quite work the same way, but you need to have one gradebook so you can see your child's grades. So what we're going to do right now is I made a fake student, and what's going to happen is in order to have the fake student have their grades up, I had to create fake grades. So let's run through it really quickly. Of course, next semester is going to look different. Every day, this is, as you can tell, in the month of December, we got Jupiter Ed and I were able to collaborate and get everything working a little bit better. So they do have their homework for the month of December up. But here you'll see this fake student, started out with ones, 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 ones. Then they got to 2s, so they're starting to improve. They missed a homework assignment, which was a 0. A 1 basically means that a 1 is equitable to a D or an F, and what that means is that they gave me a summary or they didn't analyze as they read. If you notice at the end, the last 4 grades are 3s. So a 3 is an A. So what I would do is I would take out these beginning reading scores, and the reason I would take out those reading scores is because, well, that's before the student has got a grasp, and we're trying to look at, hey, what's the mastery of this assignment or of this skill as the student grows. And so the student can't be judged based on what they did in the beginning of the year, but rather what they're doing now. So what they're doing now is showing that they're proficient, and so their grade would be a 3 in that reading. If they have a 0, I'm going to make the assumption that they didn't do their reading homework because they didn't understand it. And so that's going to give them, that shows me a huge deficit, and that is basically equitable to an F, and that tells me, or a 0, that they need to work on that standard. If you come down here, you'll notice it's 12-17, they had a book review due. So this is, of course, the 7th grade. So if you have an 8th grade student, don't worry. Here are the different standards that were assessed in that book review. So in that particular assignment, there were 5 standards assessed, and you can look these up on California Common Core State Standards, ELA. If you just put that in, you'll look reading literature, 7.1, reading literature, 7.2. And hey, on this, they mastered this assignment. They've totally got this assignment. On 7.2, they've mastered it. Oh, down here, they're not quite sure. They struggled. 7.1, they don't understand this, and this last one, they got a 3. So if you would like 1 grade for this assignment, you could average these. However, I don't. I have found that the students want me to average the score, and they want 1 letter grade. They want to know pass or fail, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But we want to encourage students to push away from that thinking, because then it kind of creates a checkbox of learning, meaning, yep, done that, don't need to move on, or ready to move on and not ready to move on within the standard. So we don't want to do that. We want to look and say, hey, well, what is 7.3 and 7.4, and how are we going to improve with that? They are going to have a monthly STAR reading test that's going to be taken. They'll have that on the first day of school this semester. So this child is reading at a 6th grade, 3rd month. The expectation is that they would be reading at a 7th grade, 4th month. So they are below basic, but this is more information for you. Up here, you're going to see that there's Tech Sets and TED Talks. They did get 1 score for this, but that's not going to be the norm. So you'll look and say, okay, well, what were these standards? How is my child performing now with these standards? Oh, man, hold on. Sorry. How is my child performing now with these standards and that's going to be their grade. Something to keep in mind is we have something called a growth mindset. So the growth mindset is this idea that you are stagnant, that you are, or this, I shouldn't say that growing is continuously happening. That, yeah, I don't know how to surf right now, and the first day I go to surf is I'm going to fail. But as every day I go to surf, I'm going to get better every single day. And so I shouldn't be judged on my first day of surfing, but rather on my 10th day of surfing or on my last day of surfing. And so that's this idea that we're growing. So we want to take out the idea of A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's, because That may be how it works from now through the rest of their academic life, but it's not how it works really in the real world. We don't get grades. We have to get better at our job. And we have to get better at our job at our standard. There's something I want you to keep in mind. On this particular student, you cannot see the percentage. I had to cut out part of the screen because I didn't want you to see everybody else's grade. But at the top of this screen, there's often a percentage. I would like you to please still ignore that percentage. What it is it takes all of these scores and averages them. And that goes against what we just talked about in the growth mindset. So something to keep in mind is, hey, if your student is really, really struggling and they get a 1 on an assignment in January, but they're a 3 in May, they are not a 2. Let's say on 7.1, they are struggling with this assignment. This is citing textual evidence and literature. So let's say they don't have any evidence ever, and they just cannot find their evidence in January, and it just confuses them. But by May, they work their butt off, and now they can cite textual evidence, and they can find evidence from the text, and they're just really just doing a great job, and now they get a 3. Well, their score is not a 2. Because that would be penalizing them for what they did not know in January. Their score would be a 3. So at the top, that does not take into account the percentage, or it says 47% F, or 97% A. That does not take into account growth mindset. It averages scores, and we don't want to do that. Also, it makes 2 a D. 2 is not a D. 2 is a C+, a C, C+, B-. A 2.5 is like a C+, B-. A 2.25, a 2.5 is like a B. A 2.75 is like a B+. A 3 is an A. A 4 is an A+. Okay, so those are some things to keep in mind. Jupiter Ed